This is very important to really get into the psyche of how the liberal hive mind looks at the MAGA mind. Now, I want to be very clear here. There are some truths and there are some untruths. So we're going to go through it, but I want you to listen carefully. The gentleman's name in question, I want to get this right. I want to at least give him his due, because I think if nothing else, you're willing to put yourself out there. You make some solid points. I'll give him that. I will give him that. He did make some solid points. His name is Lucas Bean. Here we go.
Conservatives seem like they're always angry, even though they claim they're winning all the time. These are broken people, and science can prove it. There's a psychological reason for that. Actually, there are 4. Here are the 4 psychological reasons Trump supporters are always so angry. 1. They are filled with fear. Neuroscientist Geraint Rees at University College London studied how conservative and liberal brains process threats differently. Conservative brains have a larger, more reactive amygdala that never shuts off. The amygdala is the fear center of your brain. It processes fear, anxiety, and rage. At the same time, the part of the brain that pumps the brakes on fear, called the anterior cingulate cortex, is smaller in conservative brains. That is a part of the brain that controls proportionality and rational response. Conservative brains run on fear. Liberal brains run on curiosity.
I have listened to my fair share of Trump rally speeches and the doom and gloom that gets espoused by him, especially in what I like to call the revelations part of his speech, which is always at the end. We're totally under fire. The liberals, the Democrats, they're destroying us all. It's really terrible. The whole world is that you have to vote for me. Otherwise, everything is going to end. You're going to lose everything. And a lot of people, that works. You want to say that there is scientific proof that there is cognitive development differences between those that think with a conservative bend versus a liberal bend? I'd say that's probably fairly true. I'm not going to say it isn't. At the same time, understand the different rhetoric that is thrown at people, that they're constantly being reminded of. And I will say to Lucas Bean, I don't know him. I don't know where he's based. But I live in small town conservative USA. And these are not bad people here. These are all, it's a predominantly white area, for, to be fair. But at the same time, these are law-abiding citizens. They have careers, they have families, they have community get-togethers, things of that nature. And yes, a lot of life is centered around the church, which I do hold highly responsible for a lot of this. As much as we hold the politicians accountable, and should, the evangelical church needs as much scrutiny and needs as much condemnation as anybody. He doesn't mention that, but that does play a big role, especially when education in small town America is not valued the way that religion is. That's a huge part of that cognitive development. It's the same rules that are predicated when companies like the worst of the worst, Walmart, Amazon, they're the biggest because they prey on the simple-minded individuals. That this is what they're going to amount to. This is where they will work. And the cycle repeats itself. And there's many layers to that, obviously. But this is a prime example of just that. So on the one hand, there is some correct points being made. On the other, he's not telling the full story. And that's going to be a pattern that repeats itself.
The amygdala's job is simple: detect threats and freak the fuck out. When the amygdala is oversensitive, everything new feels dangerous. Immigrants moving into your neighborhood, threat. Drag queens on television, threat. A Spanish guy on the Super Bowl stage, threat. Not because there is a threat, but because the amygdala manufactures a threat. Psychologists call this threat hypersensitivity syndrome. This means progressives literally have a more evolved brain, built for complexity, built for modern society.
I know plenty of affluent conservatives. They are highly educated. They are not backwoods illiterates like you would find in places like Arkansas and West Virginia and Tennessee and Mississippi and Alabama. No. They're conservative. They're Christian. They're well-to-do. They just happen to be conservative. So this idea that their brain is different? No. You see, what Mr. Bean here is not doing, which is what he should have done, but as we've often said, this is a class war, nothing more. He's not talking about successful conservatives, of which there are millions throughout this country. He's talking about conservatives that don't have a pot to piss in. And yet at the same time, we want to remind you that there are millions of those so-called conservatives that live in rural America that used to vote for the Democratic Party en masse during the days of FDR up until JFK. And why is that? Why was that? Because that was a time when the party actually represented workers. Those days are long gone. And that's why Bernie Sanders' run in 2016 showed you that a party that adheres to the will of working class ideals can do amazing things. That's not the Democratic Party. That Democratic Party's dead. It's been dead for a while. And they're going to do everything to kill it now that Zoran's contingent is having some success. They will move heaven and earth. They're trying to do it right now in Michigan. I hope they fail. I believe they'll fail. But again, I don't know where this guy falls other than he just doesn't like conservatives. And again, I don't want to completely dismiss what he's saying in that some of it is true, but again, he's not telling the full story.
Conservative brains are stuck in caveman threat detection mode. Perfect for 50,000 years ago. Horrible for modern society. This is why facts do not work on Trump supporters. You're not debating their ideas. You're debating their terrified lizard brains. 2. The psychological root of rage. Psychiatrist James Gilgan at Harvard Medical School spent decades studying the most violent men in American prisons. Underneath every act of rage was one emotion: shame. Gilligan found that men who couldn't process shame turned it outward, into violence, into rage, into destroying anyone who reminded them of what they never became. Most Trump supporters spent their lives falling short of who they thought they would be. They did not build the career they wanted. They did not earn the respect they thought they deserved. They peaked in high school.
See, now this is the musings of a guy who probably got shoved into a few lockers when he was in school. Now, it is entirely possible. I'm not going to say it's not. And guys, smash that like button. We're at almost 600 live viewers already. We're having a good night so far. So smash that like button if you haven't, and share the stream if you can. I want to remind you that he is not even juxtaposing between somebody who's incarcerated versus somebody who just happens to be a Trump supporter. See, that's very lowbrow and very poor taste. With that being said, do I think that there are elements of truth in the idea that there are a lot of resentful people that put somebody like Trump on a pedestal? Yes, I actually do agree with him on that one. I think there are a lot of people who are deeply resentful of others. Fear of the unknown has always been the hallmark of disinterest or outright disillusionment with the idea of immigration, even if their family were immigrants. Theirs are better, or this country's too full, or, as I have often pointed out, the real reason is because we are ruled by sociopaths and psychopaths. The reason why we have issues with immigration is because the powers that be do not want anyone to have a living wage. Maximize your shareholder value at the expense of the worker all day, every day. And that is not ideological, because as we've pointed out and will continue to point out, the Publix family is one of the most conservative families in the United States. They are one of the wealthiest families in Florida. They are diehard Republicans. And yet, the business model of Publix is essentially socialism. It's worker co-op, control of the means of production. 80% of the entire Publix corporation is owned and operated by the workers. Ain't that something? But you would never hear him say that. No. It's amazing. And yet, even though I'm not a conservative, it always seems to be that that's where the change comes from. The change always manages to come from people like Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and not people like Bernie Sanders and AOC. And yet we wonder why people always flock to the Republicans, even if the economic interests are not always in line with what they really need. It's because in America, we like people who want to kick ass and take names. And this is the thing that shitlibs still don't understand. You come off like full-blown pussies. Let's just be nice and gentle about it. Fuck that shit. Can you pay your bills? Can you put any money away? Can you take a vacation? I bet you can't do anything. And so naturally, if the entire system is predicated on this idea that you are doing everything in your capacity to try to live a decent life and you can't, and you have observed this entire system being what it is, Trump is the end game. Because a lot of people have just come to the conclusion, fuck it. He's exposed it for all it's worth. I don't care anymore. You have had ample opportunities to shift, and you don't. There are millions of Trump voters, heck, probably even supporters, that were supporters of Bernie Sanders in 2016. They were supporters of Obama in 2008. Again, inconvenient truths that no one wants to talk about, because in the end, if James Carville was right about one thing, it is the economy, stupid, and it always will be. And our economy is dead. It is shit. It does not work for anyone outside of the top 20%. And even in the top 20%, it doesn't work for probably 10%. For the top 10%, maybe it genuinely works. It's a cracking system. It's breaking, and the floodgates are gonna open. So we have to get out of this mindset that it is a left and right, conservative and liberal divide. On certain issues, yes, that's legitimate. But in the end, it's about whether you have anything or you have nothing. And very few have it all. That's the difference.
The gap between who they are and who they thought they would be produce shame, and shame that has nowhere to go becomes rage. This is what you're looking at when you see a Trump supporter lose their mind over immigrants or college graduates. It's not politics. It's a person furious at their own life who needs someone to blame for it. They are mad you did something with your life and they did not. You actually did the work. They convinced themselves that real Americans don't need ambition, that hard work is for the elites. And then they spent 20 years wondering why nothing changed. 3. Massive insecurity. Trump supporters explode the second you challenge them. Online, in person, anywhere. Roy Baumeister at Harvard University published research in 1996 on people who feel superior to others, but are actually deeply insecure because they have no real achievements to justify the feeling of superiority. He called it threatened egotism. People who pretend to feel good about themselves but fall apart the moment someone disagrees. The prison guard who hurts an inmate for talking back. The cop who gets violent because you ask a question. The MAGA guy online who has a full meltdown because you correct his misinformation. Trump did not create these people. He found them.
That is a salient point. Trump is P.T. Barnum, and he figured out how to cultivate a network of people that would live and die for him. But that's because these people have been forgotten. You see, this is also the part that doesn't make the grade in the statement. I've told the story before. I'll tell it again. I can remember when I went to see Lincoln's tomb in Springfield, Illinois, and I had to fly into St. Louis. and I drove up Interstate 55. And anybody who's ever driven through central Illinois knows that it's basically farm country. That's the essence of the entire state outside of Chicago and Springfield. And so I'm driving up. We might as well have been in Kansas. That's what it looked like. And I'm passing this red barn along the side of the highway. And something caught my eye as I was passing by, middle of nowhere. So probably on the farm. Dozens and dozens of acres, maybe hundreds of acres, who knows. But he carved one word into the side of his barn. And the word, as you could guess it, was Trump. So when people are down and out on their luck and they've given up, some people just want to see it all burn to the ground. And this is the thing about, again, it's economics. It could be conservative, it could be liberal, it really doesn't matter. But in this case, it is painfully obvious that the disconnect here is that he's not making it about the fact that these people do not have a pot to piss in. And that is always the greatest sin, because it is always about economics. They think it's because these people, they think it's because they have a difference of opinion about guns, about books, about sexual orientation, about abortion. That's how you keep people divided. Divide and conquer. It's been going on forever. So on the one hand, he's identifying, and again, this is why I wanted you guys to see this, because on the one hand, he's identifying part of the problem. He's not telling the whole truth, because people in his economic position can't tell the truth. You can't tell the real truth as to why this is the way that it is. Do you know why communities in this country thrive and others don't? Yes, there is truth to the Zionist cause. Affluent Jewish communities have the leg up versus working class communities that are white, brown, and black. And where is the connection? Connection's simple. The banking system decides where the money goes and doesn't go. That's why you have redlining, blockbusting, and a whole bunch of other shit that never disappeared, that still exists today. And it affects pretty much everybody who is on those peripheries of maybe, just maybe able to survive, but just can't quite get over the hump. And that's what happens for a lot of these people. They just can't get over the hump. And after decade of the bullshit and the bullshit, they basically harbor a lot of resentment. And listen, are there nasty ass white supremacist sons of bitches in this country who just hate everybody? Yes, there are. And guess what? I don't give a fuck about them because they don't control anything. The Zionists are just as bigoted, just as disgusting, and just as supremacist, and they control everything. You're not going to hear him mention those guys, not for 1 second. But we all know that that's where the problem comes from. It is all economic. It always will be. And no matter what anybody says, if Indiana can vote for Barack Obama, it is always about economics. There are not enough racists in the United States to have that type of an impact. That's why they highlight Oath Keepers marching around DC. I don't care if it's 100. I don't give a fuck if it's 1,000. This is a country of 350 million people. It's the little things that they want you distracted by. It's like the laser pointer with a cat. That's what this is. And that's what they want you to believe is the problem. They never want to say, you know, maybe NAFTA's a bad idea. Maybe normal trade relations with China. Maybe the removal of Glass-Steagall. Maybe the Telecom Act. Maybe the crime bill. It's all connected. But again, only part of the story being told.
They love him because he never apologizes, never admits he's wrong, and always blames someone else for his problems. To them, that feels like strength. That's what they do in their real lives. It's children having a temper tantrum, and they recognize it because they have temper meltdowns just like Trump does. 4. Parasocial relationship with Trump. Psychologist Henry Teifel at the University of Bristol studied what happens when people have no individual identity and attach themselves to a group or a leader. Teifel called this social identity theory. When their in-group feels threatened, they don't just feel defensive. They feel like their entire existence is under attack. People who already feel like failures, who are filled with shame and humiliation, are the most susceptible. The group becomes their entire sense of self-worth. That's why they fight so ferociously for someone who will never know their name. Trump does not know who they are. He never will know who they are. He doesn't care. But they will burn the country down for him anyway. Because
I don't think that they are under any illusions at this point that Trump loves them. I just think they've accepted the reality that if somebody like Trump can pull it off. Have you noticed something? And I've been pointing this out, and I'm wondering, guys in the audience, if you think it's a salient point or not. I do think there is a distinct difference between Trump's first term and his current term. During his first term, they came after him with everything they had, every day of his entire presidency. And frankly, the only moment that I can recall in which there was a unified appreciation for the commander-in-chief was when he bombed Damascus. That was it. Remember when Van Jones and Fareed Zakaria said that he became the president today? That was the one and only moment that I can recall between 2017 and 2021. Only moment. Today, despite everything that's going on, despite the looting of the Treasury, crimes against humanity, suppressing the Epstein files, being proven to be a sex pest and a pedophile himself, they're doing banquet ceremonies in D.C. last night. All the press corps are all showing up. Do you know why? Because he eventually capitulated. He was always an ogre. He was always a narcissist. He was always a bastard. But he wasn't a capitulator to the extent that he needed to be. And they made him one. And now, you don't hear any talks about impeachment, about getting him out, stopping the crimes. Do you know why? Because now he's playing ball. Now he's doing what he's told. And everything is copacetic. But again, Mr. Bean here is only going to tell you part of that story. Now you understand why millions of people who initially were all on board with Trump have now given up themselves. And that's where the America First movement comes into play. And it cannot be ideological along any of those lines. It has to be workers above all else.
without him, they are nothing. They are delusional. He is not your friend. You will never know Donald Trump. Trump understands this, though. He nursed a parasocial relationship with his followers. He then gave their shame a target. Immigrants, liberals, the deep state. He told them the reason their lives did not work out was not their fault. Why start taking accountability now? It was those other people's fault. So they stopped feeling like losers. They started feeling like they needed to punish people for their shame. The MAGA cult is made up of angry, broken, shame-filled people. This isn't a political movement. It's a toxic support group for adult children.
I can't put a number on the percentage of what I would consider MAGA to be specifically in the category of what he describes. But let's just say it's 20%. Let's say 20%. The 80-20 rule, as they often say. Do I think it's fair to say that 20% of Trump supporters fall into a category that a lot of people would not like or would not generally want to associate with? Yes. You know, a percentage of shit libs I would put in a category of people that I would not want to associate with? Pretty much 100%.